Speaking truth to power, workers' unions demand fairer labor policies. Residents of damaged buildings in Hualien fight to secure emergency government funding for demolitions. Tensions rise in the South China Sea as Chinese and Philippine vessels compete for control. Plus, we look at how Taiwan is dealing with the country's growing mountain of e-waste. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Thousands of people took to the streets of Taipei on Labor Day, with unions demanding more from the government. John Van Trieste was on the scene.
There's still 20 days till the new president and cabinet take office, and already they're being lampooned. At this May 1st Labor Day rally in Taipei, activists dressed like incoming President Lai Ching-te and his pick for labor minister danced to a rap about what they say are their unfriendly labor policies, cutting pensions and vacation days. Labor Day protests are an annual tradition here in front of the presidential office. But this year, things are a little different. The Democratic Progressive Parties won a third consecutive term in charge of the presidency. That's something that no parties managed to do since the first direct election in 1996. These protesters want to make sure this third term won't just be more of the same. The government has defended its record on labor rights over the past two terms. In a Facebook post, Premier Chen Jianren highlighted continued raises of the minimum wage and over $8 billion in appropriations for pensions and labor insurance. But there's skepticism here on the ground.
当年蔡英文政府他所提出的是这个应该要让基本工资调升至3万，但很明显的是，在这个政权要连续执政底下之前，都还没有做到这件事情，所以才只能说他们连续8年有调涨这个基本工资，但是离执政这个当时承诺这个3万元，其实基本上是跳票的。
Union reps from across Taiwan, spanning fields from medicine to railway workers, have put together 5 demands for the incoming government. One is higher wages and more overtime, plus a transparent way to make sure women and men earn the same. Second, they want workers protected in situations like when one company buys out another. Third, they want to make forming unions easier and, controversially, for public servants like firefighters to be allowed unions, something not currently allowed. Fourth is protections for retirement and pensions. And fifth is better conditions for nurses and other medical workers, who they say are overworked and unfairly treated. While the speakers here are putting pressure on the incoming administration, they're also equally unhappy with all Taiwan's major political parties.
去年年底呢，3党的候选人都有对我们劳工团体呢做出了很多的承诺，劳工政策的承诺，包括企业合并要经过工会的同意，包括退休要保障。 包括工会的筹组，3个党的候选人呢，都有跟我们劳工来做承诺。
And with that, the mass of workers sets off on a march through downtown Taipei, from the presidential office to the legislature and back. For most in Taiwan, Labor Day is just another day off work. But for the hundreds or maybe even thousands of laborers gathered here, there's a sense that when it comes to workers' rights, there's no time for resting. Here, several hundred meters in front of the presidential office, the message of these workers is clear. The president may be about to change, but the demands he's going to face from workers aren't going anywhere. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
More and more buildings ruined by last month's Hualien earthquake are facing demolition. But in many cases, displaced residents are being told they'll have to foot the bill themselves. Jeremy Olivier has the story.
This building is still standing a month after a magnitude 7.2 earthquake hit Hualien in eastern Taiwan, but just barely. It's been condemned, and while officially displaced residents can opt to have the building fixed up and reinforced, the people who once lived here say that's not a realistic option.
结构技师来了6、7组以上，几乎都认为这我们富裕精华应该没办法落成补强。县政府是要求我们
The bill in this case is expected to run up to nearly $2.5 million, too high a burden for many. But the Hualien County government is only paying for the demolition of buildings that are at immediate risk of collapse.
如果说它涉及到公共危险的话，或者是说它已经是非常危险状态，那我们就会考虑要去做抢险啊。
But pressure on the government to pay isn't just coming from displaced people. People in buildings next door to ruined structures say they're worried too.
如果说它现在倒掉了，它会把我们这个横梁挤住，整个这样折断之后，我们的住户全部都会垮。
The Hualien County government says it's listening to people who want to demolish and rebuild their condemned buildings. But it says it will have to see how much the cabinet gives in reconstruction funds before it can agree to help out. The cabinet could make an announcement as soon as Thursday, but until then, it's just one more uncertainty in the lives of people this earthquake has turned upside down. Howard Zhang, John Van Trieste, and Jeremy Olivier for TaiwanPlus.
First quarter economic growth hit 6.5%, the highest in 11 years. The Statistics Bureau says this was driven by strong exports, with huge demand for equipment for emerging technologies like AI. The government has raised its annual growth prediction to 3.57% off the back of the Q1 performance. But some economists are warning that the super growth may be short-lived if the AI bubble bursts. Tensions between China and the Philippines are ramping up in the South China Sea. The latest incident saw Chinese ships blast a Philippine vessel with water cannons. That tactic is being used more and more by Beijing as it attempts to assert its authority in the contested waters. Rick Lauert is in the South China Sea on board a Philippine Navy vessel.
A game of cat and mouse in the contested waters of the South China Sea. A Chinese Navy vessel approaches US and Philippine ships conducting live fire target practice. Coming as close as 600 yards of amphibious transport USS Harper's Ferry and disrupting the exercise.
Harper's Ferry did not continue her firing of the guns because for safety concern of the Chinese vessel.
In a first, these joint military drills, known as balikatan or shoulder to shoulder, are taking place outside of Philippine territorial waters within the country's exclusive economic zone, an area Beijing claims as its own and in which it has been increasingly operating.
As this Philippine Navy patrol vessel takes part in exercises, China has made its presence here quite obvious. For days, Chinese spy vessels and warships have been in the vicinity, often within sight of US and Philippine ships. Officers here have been monitoring Chinese movements and warning them via radio to stay clear of the path of the drills.
These annual exercises are usually a show of force by the US and Philippines military. But this year, it's also showcasing the strength of the host country's international alliances, with Australian and French vessels also taking part in the drills. It comes as the Philippine President, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who came to power last year, promises to take a firm hand against Chinese territorial claims here, standing up to aggression like the use of water cannons by Chinese Coast Guard on Philippine ships in disputed shoals. Marcos wants to modernize the country's military by more deeply cooperating with the United States, a move that not everyone here supports.
The United States provides the Philippines with a lot of options for military modernization, from tactics, training, and procedure to exactly how to deploy all of that new stuff. However, there are also concerns that the United States coming in could potentially paint the Philippines as a target against China.
Balikatan organisers say the 3 weeks of exercises are not aimed at any specific threat. But drills are concentrated in the country's northernmost provinces facing Taiwan, another flashpoint with China, and here in the contested South China Sea. As the world's largest militaries jostle for influence in waterways crucial to international trade, the Philippines is considering how best, and at what cost, to protect its delicate status quo in the face of a rising China. Alex Chen and Rick Lauert in the South China Sea for TaiwanPlus.
South Korea is in talks to join part of the AUKUS security pact. South Korean and Australian officials discussed the issue at talks in Melbourne. Seoul is looking to join the military technology portion of the trilateral defense agreement. AUKUS brings together the US, the UK, and Australia to counter military and technological threats in the Indo-Pacific.
I think history shows us that what happens on the Korean Peninsula matters to the security and stability of our region. We have no doubt that North Korea's destabilising, provocative, escalatory actions are a threat to international peace and security, as well as to the peace and security of the ROK.
A Chinese ship captain convicted of illegally dredging sand in Taiwan's territory has lost his last appeal. The captain, surnamed Sun, was arrested in 2022 for stealing sand from the seafloor near the Penghu Islands. He was sentenced to 1 year and 10 months in prison. Sun appealed the verdict, but the Supreme Court has upheld the ruling. Lawmakers have called these illegal dredging operations part of Beijing's gray zone warfare tactics, meant to tie up Taiwan's Coast Guard and threaten the livelihoods of people on the outlying islands. Talks to end plastic pollution have wrapped up in Canada, with some progress on the wording of what is supposed to be a global treaty. But there are sticking points. Delegates from 175 countries are struggling to agree on whether to put limits on plastic production. It's the fourth time the talks have been held, with the final round taking place in South Korea later this year. According to the UN, around 2,000 garbage trucks worth of plastic are dumped into the world's oceans, rivers, and lakes every day. Plastics pollution is a global problem, but so is electronic waste. As a major tech manufacturer, Taiwan produces a lot of that. For more on this, Sally Jensen spoke to Armin Ibitz, an associate professor and environmental health expert at Wenzhou Ursuline University.
What is the status of electronic or e-waste in Taiwan at the moment?
Taiwan is one of the key players when it comes to electronics and also, of course, exporting electronics. And this comes, of course, also with a high usage of electronics also within Taiwan, so which means the volumes of e-waste is quite enormous, and it's growing. So among all the volumes of waste, for example, the e-waste is normally topping. So we see that recycling facilities and recycling by itself is not really catching up with the production. So we talk about some kind of a gap of the generation is succeeding the recycling facilities by a factor of 5 or something, which is quite difficult.
Is Taiwan doing enough to deal with this issue?
And I think Taiwan has done quite a lot through its recycling management system, I would say. But I would say the secondary raw material market is one of the key issues here, which we need to focus. So as long as you get the substances, maybe from chemical processes, get out of the materials and out of the electronic waste. Another question is, where do you put it in? So it starts from the design. Taiwan is, of course, a key player in also designing electronics. So if Taiwan could act up to its role, I would say this would be not only beneficial for Taiwan, but also for the whole supply chain.
What can be done at the consumer level to reduce Taiwan's enormous amounts of e-waste?
I think one of the key things is awareness of the problems we are facing here. Now we go shopping, and I would expect that most of the consumers do not think of how to dispose the product at the end of life. This is simply not on our list when we buy something. Also during the operation time, for example, which means it would need more energy. So one key aspect of increasing circularity is for sure informing and providing information for the consumer on the consumer side.
That was Sally Jensen speaking with environmental health expert Armin Ibitz. Now we're going to take a quick break, but still to come on TaiwanPlus News. How is Taiwan's military stepping up its disaster response training? Find out when we come back.
At Connected, we believe in the power of dialogue.
Taipei 101
It's not just about the headlines, it's about finding common ground. Join the conversation.
Connected with Divya Gopalan on TaiwanPlus.
I'm Ed Moon in Taiwan's Jinmen Islands, and you're watching TaiwanPlus News, the voice of freedom in Asia.
过人生的话，你发现说我们大部分都是爱美的。
我自己少遇见一朵花，我可能就不是这个样子。
开始思考什么叫做一个本土性，
大声的唱出来说我是台湾人。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taiwan's state-of-the-art military training center has opened to the media for the first time. Tiffany Wong looks at how the country is turning to high-tech to prepare for the worst.
Preparing for disaster. Soldiers at Taiwan's National Defense Medical Center are trying to save these civilians from a simulated typhoon. This is the first glimpse media have gotten into the country's modern training grounds. This new type of tactical response training uses AI technology to help soldiers feel like they're in a real life-or-death situation and test their responses.
战场的第一现场，除了做敌火的压制，伤兵的一个自救互救之外，会将伤患脱离到一个相对安全的伤患收集点，再做一个初步的处置。处置完之后，才会送到我们所谓的后送载具去做后送到所谓的医疗院所。
The VR goggles visually immerse soldiers in disaster scenarios, and the props and dummies recreate the physical environment.
在荧幕里面，其实它会真实的呈现出有相关的爆裂物。那他们身上训员的身上也会穿戴所谓的电极贴片，所以到时候在有攻击的行为，你没有躲在适当的掩体的状况之下，你就会遭受微幅的电极量的电击，让学员知道说，这是一个不是单纯一个 game 的游戏这样子。
All this high-tech gadgetry is meant to put the trainees into as realistic scenarios as possible. But with some luck, the worst of these will stay firmly in the virtual world. Devin Tsai and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
China's newest aircraft carrier, the Fujian, has set off from Shanghai for sea trials. The Fujian is China's first domestically designed carrier to use aircraft catapults. It is China's second domestically made carrier and its third overall. The Fujian displaces more than 80,000 tons and was first launched in 2022. The trials are to test the ship's electrical and propulsion systems. At least 19 people are dead and 30 injured after part of a highway in southern China collapsed overnight. About 18 meters of the Meilong Expressway in Meizhou, Guangdong Province, crumbled just after 2 a.m. on Wednesday when a sinkhole opened under the road. 18 cars fell into the hole, with some cars catching on fire. The southern province has been devastated by more than a week of heavy rains, leading to floods that have swamped major cities and destroyed bridges. 12,000 people have been evacuated from their homes in Indonesia after a volcano erupted. Mount Ruang in North Sulawesi province suddenly started spewing lava, prompting authorities to raise the area's alert level. Experts warn that the volcanic activity may trigger a tsunami. Nearby residents were evacuated as a precaution. Indonesia straddles the Pacific Ring of Fire, an area with many volcanoes that's prone to extreme seismic activity. More and more businesses in Hong Kong are closing their doors as the local economy slumps. The city was once one of Asia's most famous shopping hubs, but many stores are struggling even after the pandemic. Rosie Greninger reports.
The once bustling shopping streets of Hong Kong are filled with vacant stores as business owners feel the pinch of economic pressures. More than 20,000 companies have deregistered in the first quarter of 2024, up more than 70% from the same period last year. When Jackie Yu opened his Japanese gift shop 12 years ago, the tourist shopping district of Mong Kok was packed with stalls, street food and tourists. But now faced with expensive rent, lack of tourists and a labour shortage, he's been forced to shut up shop and move online.
即係我覺得係一講起我有少少想喊嘅，其實真係，因為咧做咗好耐咧真係好唔捨得嘅，係啊，咁但係咧冇辦法，因為嗰個環境逼成啊，嗰個環境係要你，因為如果你唔將佢閂咗門咧，你根本係冇錢交租。
Despite borders reopening after COVID closures, Yu says his business has been doing worse than during the pandemic. The tourism board recorded a 38.9% drop in visitors from mainland China in 2023, compared with pre-pandemic 2019. Mainland Chinese tourists who once chose the city for their shopping needs are choosing cheaper locations in the region. Many expatriates who left during the pandemic haven't returned, while Hong Kong residents are increasingly choosing to travel across the border to the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen, where they say prices and services are better.
And then there are people who travel during holiday to Japan and other countries because this currency makes things cheap for Hong Kong people. But of course, in return, when tourists come to Hong Kong, they will find it very expensive. The services are not that good. It's unattractive.
This week, the city's leader John Lee called for calm about these business closures, saying industries need to adapt and there are newcomers entering the market. But the rise of 4 lease signs on Hong Kong's shopping streets are telling a different story. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
A part of Taiwan's second largest city is getting a makeover by going back in time. Louise Ra reports on the young people who dedicated a decade to preserving some of what made Taichung City stand out.
The area around Taichung City's railway station was once a flourishing economic hub. The crowds and businesses have trickled away, but now some of the young people in Taiwan's second largest city are trying to revive the vigor of its heyday.
大概在这个范围内就有5间百货公司，像这么多百货公司里面一定会有硬体设备的需求，然后它有维修的需求，然后他们就会call师傅要去修理，所以那个产业整个是完全联动在一起的。
These young residents pressed the local government to preserve the area's cultural heritage as they redevelop areas of the city, such as these historic train tracks, which were meant to be torn up.
在地的文史的团队觉得这个空间其实是一个很重要的文化资产。那如果它能够被保留下来，然后做一定的公共开放的使用，它其实对于这个城市的一些历史的价值有很重要的意义。
These activists weren't even born when this area of Taichung was in its prime, but after 10 years of dedicated work, they've managed to bring back some of the sparkle it lost along the way. Eason Chen and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Vets in Taiwan have rescued 2 of the country's endangered eastern grass owls. Our reporter Wesley Lewis looks at efforts to protect the animals.
A rare sighting, affectionately known as aerial elves, Taiwan's endangered eastern grass owls are fighting for survival. This juvenile owl was found on the side of a road with a fractured leg. Veterinarians inserted a bone splint to treat the injury, then gave it regular physical therapy, which requires putting the bird under.
如果在没有麻醉的情况下帮它做复健的话，它很容易会因为痛然后就反抗，然后这样会蛮容易受伤的。然后如果麻醉下来的话， 就是可以好好帮它热敷，然后让肌肉放松，就是它伸展会比较可以伸展到位。
There are fewer than 500 eastern grass owls left in the wild in Taiwan. They face many existential threats, including anti-bird nets near farms and airports, poisoned rats, habitat destruction, and stray dogs. And conservationists have their work cut out for them.
从草鸮遇到的威胁 的这些种类来看，其实就可以知道说，要做草鸮的保育是一件非常不容易的事情。它有非常多层面的，可能跟农业相关的，然后也有可能跟开发工业经济相关。
A second mature grass owl was also recently brought to the veterinary clinic with a weak immune system, but it scraped its eye and injured itself when scared by the noise and lights.
主要就是一开始来太虚弱了，就是每天都想说会不会死掉，然后现在比较麻烦的是太激动了，因为就是可能有一点声响干嘛，它就在里面蹦蹦跳，然后容易撞到自己又受伤。
The veterinarians were able to treat the eye by extracting the owl's blood to make platelet-rich plasma, also known as PRP. After a few drops of PRP, the veterinarians stitched up the owl's eye.
就是它溃疡的地方，我们会把它缝起来，就是让它眼皮暂时不要打开，让它去保持里面的湿润度，然后可以比较促进愈合。
Conservationists and veterinarians are working together to protect these precious birds. They have been urging local farmers to not encroach on eastern grass owl habitats. For now, these two avian patients are being prepared for re-release, and hopefully soon, they can return to the wild. Joseph Wu and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Visit the TaiwanPlus website for more of our reports. And finally, before we sign off, take a chance with me and head to Sweden, where there's a pop-up exhibition about ABBA. It's in the city of Malmö, where the group won the Eurovision Song Contest 50 years ago. I'm Eric Gao. We'll see you next time.